right, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Square. I am live from Israel. Eddie, what is happening, brother?
Hello, James. Welcome to your 2 a.m. show. Is it 2 a.m. for you over there? You're a trooper, buddy. It's 3 a.m.
It's 302 hours.
Hey, a man fulfilling his responsibilities. So I appreciate it, brother. This is really cool. And we've got a great show today because we'll be bringing in some of our guests. I'm really looking forward to that, to talk about the Court of Honest Internet. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a few guests in the green room that might be brand new for you. Just sit tight. You don't need to do anything aside from test your camera and microphone. James has got all of the controls. He's going to bring you in. And what we're going to want to hear from you, what are your thoughts based on last week's amazing kind of moment where James just came up with, what if we had a court of honest internet? I've been thinking a lot about this this week, and I think it's ultra important. Here's why. More and more, if big tech companies are, not if, because they are going to continue banning people, especially politicians. And big tech has provided, they didn't know it at the time, but they provided a town square type of environment for people, a public place. And if they're going to deny people, if they're going to zap them out of that public place, then at some point, government's going to come along and say, okay, enough of that. We don't want that. We don't want government taking control of these kinds of applications. That's going to happen if we continue down the road of silencing people because we don't like noises that come out of their mouth. So the idea that James put forward is, what if we had a court of honest internet that lived outside of the criminal court? And so then if you are unjustly punished by other people on the internet or tech companies, you can have your day in court and you can get redemption for the wrongs. And this includes, I think this started actually when we were talking about media companies printing bad information about you. You can have your day in court to prove that in actual fact, no, you're the good guy, or this was a misunderstanding, or this was a blatant lie. So gather your thoughts.
Or a violation of your First Amendment right to free speech.
Exactly. Let's have that one, right? Yeah. Okay, James, so should we go over a couple of the kind of ground rules or do some comments here? What do you want to do first?
So I want to go over a few disclaimers, housekeeping rules. We're bringing you guys on. Say your piece. Please be mindful, respectful of the town square. Sometimes these discussions tend to be a bit heated. It's okay to disagree. I know that's something very controversial to say in 2021 to the online version of the internet. But it is okay to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to disagree. I'll say that again. We don't all always have to agree. All opinions on the show, especially by myself and Eddie, are our own and don't reflect any organization we're associated with, endorse, or otherwise interact with. If you're watching us live, you can comment. If you want to be on the show, and join us on screen, message me on LinkedIn, James J. Azar, if we're not connected there, and I will bring you guys on. I will send you a link, and here we go. Okay, let's get to some comments. Good evening from Matt Lee. What's up, everybody, from Andrew. And Matt says, I just keep running into you, James. I know, it's like the third time today, Matt. Literally the third time. I started the morning with you, which was my afternoon. We then did a panel together midday today, about 8 hours ago. So depending on if you work by meals, about 2 meals ago, and here we are again.
Nathan's comments very interesting here. I hadn't thought of that analogy, Nathan. Thank you for that contribution. A DMV for the internet. It's kind of interesting because if the DMV is government run, or is that private in the US?
It's government run.
Okay, so it's a government run, but kind of like that. I mean, so I lived in Canada for quite a few years, and they privatized the whole DMV, right? So we still had the standard, but it was privatized. So I think that's kind of interesting to have some kind of, you need to jump through a few hoops as maybe if you've done something defamatory against somebody else, not just the financial consequence of that, but maybe you should be forced to jump through a few hoops so you can be, I don't know, a decent citizen online. Anyway,
yeah, we'll talk about that as we come up. I want to get to everyone's comments. My awesome co-host for the other side of cyber and the magnificent JJ says 3 a.m. Total commitment, James. Absolutely. What's up, all? That's Eric. This is John De La Cruz. Whoa, JJ. Good morning or good evening. I think for JJ, it's good morning. And Jacqueline says it's 9:35 for her. Andrew says Fahrenheit 451. We're going to get to that, Andrew, and you can come on the show. And if you want to talk about that, we will. Nora says, hello, James and Eddie. Thank you for hosting this. Happy to be here.
Hello.
Eric is on the show vibe, James and Eddie. Well, you're welcome to come on, Eric. Would love to have you on. And John De La Cruz says, oh, I got on a few minutes late. 3 a.m. for James is committed. So, yes, you guys make it worth it. I'll be, quite frank. So let's start off. I want to bring in our first guest. Let's bring up Paul, and I want to get Paul's kind of concept on the court of the honest internet. And again,
right. Welcome, Paul. Good to see you. There you go. Hello, Paul. How are you, man?
Hey, nice to talk to you guys finally.
Fantastic. Good to have you.
The model that I was thinking about the quarter of the internet would be more like a kind of like a private Wikipedia, where when somebody has a complaint against you or you have a complaint, a ticket is issued on a site like Wikipedia, and then all parties involved are notified and they can plead their case, and the court would issue a judgment, and then you'd have a permanent place on the internet that you could go to as a referee or as a referendum.
And what I like about that is it provides historical record too for right? Yeah. So if there's, what was the name of that kid again in the MAGA hat who had the Aboriginal guy drumming? What was that kid's name?
I don't remember. I just remember he's rich.
Yeah, he's very rich now.
Nick something.
Right.
Nick
yeah,
something.
exactly.
Nick Sandman.
Yeah,
Nick Sandman.
Yeah. So what's funny about that? I was chatting with my wife just before the show about that fella, and of course, she just had the narrative from before, right? She just had, oh yeah, that guy who was, that racist guy, that guy that was horrible to that Aboriginal man, because it's like, okay, he's rich, but undoing the narrative, that, Paul, is interesting for like a Wikipedia historical line.
Yeah,
right?
but you can't do that. I mean, we know, Paul, that they're changing terms in the dictionary today. I mean, that's literally like we can't even agree on a singular vocabulary. We can't agree on what a word is. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett testified and said, sexual preference, and that became really offensive, apparently, to talk about people's sexual preferences, and that's considered a derogatory term and dictionary.
One of the things you could also do in kind of like what Facebook's doing, every time you type in COVID, they get this little thing that pops up. If you have a link to Wikipedia, every time somebody comes up with something that's been proven false or has been adjudicated, you could have this link pop up in social media. And so people would be able to say, hey, this is suspicious. So every time Nick Sandman's face comes up in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you'd have a link you could click on and say, hey, this was proven to be false or true. However, it came out.
That's really interesting. That is very interesting.
So that's a really cool concept, Paul. And I'll tell you why. So I think the concept also lacks teeth. And part of what I'm looking for, part of why I want the court of honest internet is because, well, it's not a criminal court, it's a civil court. And so when we look at, let's say, like this week, people who've tuned into my practitioner brief have heard this, but WhatsApp. So Monday or Tuesday, I think it was here in Israel, WhatsApp decided to ban 30 members of one party that sits in the Israeli parliament, meaning i.e. the Israeli Congress, and their spouses from using WhatsApp, which is, as Eddie can tell you, the main form of communication in Israel.
Yeah, they don't text there. It's all WhatsApp.
They don't text. It's all WhatsApp.
Right.
So they've essentially, that's no different than AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile coming to us and going, hey guys, you can no longer use our phone service. Why? We think you violated our terms of service. And you're like, you guys can't do that. But they just did. And then WhatsApp sued the government of India for wanting to pass a law that would require them to track who is sending messages to who in WhatsApp. They're going like, that's a violation of privacy. And WhatsApp has a strict privacy policy. And you're like, do you? Because how did you know to ban those 30 people in Israel?
Right.
And India is the largest market for WhatsApp. They have 450 million users in India alone. So that is their largest market by far. And so
you're going to have a hard time doing that in more than one country. So, we're talking primarily.
Yeah, but if you started off in one country, courts were mob rule for a long time until one country said, okay, we're going to really organize this. We're going to put down a set of laws. We're going to put a judge, and you're going to have to deal with that. And it's not going to be a mob rule anymore. It's not going to be the crowd decides this, but rather a kind of organized aspect of it. And once those companies are held liable for it, I think their behavior is going to change everywhere.
I think that's there's 2 points there, right? So the one of the critical things is you separate the police from the courts. The courts can't be the same people that are ticketing you. You have to have a mechanism to get people into the courts that are unbiased. And the third thing would be, or going along would be, if you get, we talked about making companies pay. How do you do that? How do you make companies pay? Find them. If they are held accountable, does that mean people are no longer going to shop at Home Depot? Or does that mean they're going to have to pay a fine? Or what does that look like?
The fines I'm less bullish on nowadays, because it's like that kid Nick, CNN and MSNBC and all these horrific journalists paid out a lot of money to him, but they made a pile of money keeping millions of eyeballs glued to the screen. So I don't know that it should happen, but I don't know that it's enough.
But it's not just financial, it's also access, right?
Mm-hmm.
The banning of someone is cutting them off as society.
Yeah.
Right? If you're banned off of social media, if you're banned off of Facebook or Twitter, we saw what happened to former President Trump. We saw what happened to Parler as an app. When these big tech companies decide to come after you and cut you off, they can completely take you away from the globe. I mean, I forgot that President Trump even existed. I mean, if it wasn't for traveling through the airports and like getting a glimpse of CNN, I'm like, oh, they're still talking about him? I was like, the guy hasn't been president in like 5 months.
Wow.
Like, don't you have a news story to cover?
So what I'm saying is I think fining them for doing things like that is not enough. There should be some other social punishment. So as an example, you run a story about an innocent kid who's a high school kid wearing a MAGA hat and somebody's drumming a thing in his face and he's vilified for it. Okay, so it's the wrong thing. They got it wrong or they did it wrong on purpose, doesn't matter. They got the financial fine, but I think there should also be some kind of, okay, well, we need to force airtime for that kid so he can go on these programs and be vindicated. Right, they should be forced to undo what they did in addition to the financial fine.
So I think you're bringing up a whole other topic. We'll get to that. We have Matt in the green room. Paul, thanks for coming on stage, man.
Thank you, man.
You can stay in the green room. If you have something to say, you can use the private chat. We'll bring you back up here. Okay, there's a private chat here in the backstage for anyone. So you guys feel free to use that. So I'll keep you in the green room. I won't kick you out the green room. So just hang out. If you have something to add, we'll bring you on. I want to bring the next guest on, which is going to be Matt, who's a constant guy, a constant commenter on the show, and a really good one. But and we've got Andrew Todd also on hold, and other people. If you guys want to come on stage, please let me know. We'll send you the link. Come on, we're trying to update our format a little bit and become a little bit more 2021, right? And actually have actual audible debate, kind of like take the Clubhouse rules only on video, which is great because maybe then people won't spew stupid stuff like some of them do on Clubhouse. So with that being said, though, the court of I kind of want to summarize one thing about the court of honest internet, because Eric brings up a really cool comment here. He goes, the solution to honest internet: define honesty, define bound internet, define an arbitration platform and rules authorized through ascension agreement, sanction, and sanction duration. So to me, this is more than money. Okay. And what I mean by the court of honest internet is I don't necessarily know that it's one judge, right? It could be a jury of your peers. It could be a group of people that vote on whether something is legitimate or not. It could be people who serve terms, meaning, people who for this week are essentially jurors and arbiters in the court of honest internet. I want to bring Matt up. So Matt, you're coming up. I want to get your input on this one. Hey, Matt.
Howdy. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's very cool.
How you doing, Matt? Fantastic to see you.
Thank you. I'm doing wonderful and getting better by the second. So you know from our earlier conversation, James, that I like to live kind of in that what if world, right? Sometimes. Right. So what if we are approaching this differently? What if we simply treated it like professional athletes or impact from a financial perspective? And what I mean by that is I'm building on something you said earlier today, right? About how there should be a revenue share or potentially my personal identifiable. But think about it. What if you kick someone off WhatsApp in Israel and that's 80% of how you communicate? You should have some index of how much of an impact a particular platform has in someone's life, right? So let's say Facebook and you can't get a job without it, or WhatsApp and you can't talk to your mom without it. But that is some empirical value of what they've got to do to buy me out. I'm like an athlete. That's my contract. You want me on your platform? I generate data. I generate money for you. There is no court. You want me out? There's a number.
That's brand new, man. That's really
I try. That's what I do. I'm usually crazy, but it works sometimes.
Yeah. So then you have a scoring system for pretty much every user. And that scoring system equates to and this would be great because then people would see how much value they are. They are the product.
Back to James's point, I'm stealing it, but yes.
Right, to all of these people. Right. Because I like to say, I've said this before on the show, it's kind of like the cow complaining how the steak gets served when people find out what Facebook are doing with their data, right? But then they'll at least say, this is how much your steak is worth, right? This is how much you're worth.
Platform, but that's $26,000 because you can't get a job. And what that would do is the more ubiquitous the platform, the more ingrained and large it is. If they can end a campaign, they should have a number. No problem. We think you violated our stuff, but because we understood that we took you on, we let you build our situation, we sold your data, there's the number. And then there's not a court. There's no attribution of right or wrong. It's just a number. I mean, there's places that falls apart, right? Somebody abusing the system, but there are. I would just think it's an interesting concept to explore potentially.
It is, and I think
I won't take up any more time.
No,
you're fine.
No, this is great. So here's because that would end up being very complicated. It's like how do you put that together? So here's where I think this is all going. We're going to continue to hash out ideas like this. Governments are going to put pressure eventually on these tech companies. And I think years from now, hopefully not too many, we're going to come full circle to the First Amendment and go, let her rip. Because all we're doing here, and we're having to do it because we're being forced into this corner, we, the people who are the proponents of First Amendment, right? We are having to figure out how the hell do we survive when people can muzzle us in the First Amendment? That's what essentially, that's what we're fighting against. At the end of the day, the solution is going to be the First Amendment.
The
thing that we came up with.
But the challenge is like you have this argument, and I've heard it made before. Facebook, they're a platform. I think you guys have argued it out yourselves, right? They're a platform. They provide it. Let's say it's Apple and the argument with Epic Games, or let's say it's whatever those are. You're absolutely right that there's a gap. And I'll give you a perfect example. My son bought a $60 game called Modern Warfare, or whatever it was, Cold War. All right, he's laughing. We had some challenges getting it running, and ultimately he didn't have an account associated. So he finally associated his Activision account. And the system detected cheating because of that, a repeated attempt to launch the game without the linked account. They locked him out. They didn't give the money back. It's permanently locked to his banned account. And he can never, ever, ever, ever swing a leg over that horse. Not ever. Nowhere to go. Wow. No arbitration. Just screw you. And you might even make an argument that some of these vendors might be less scrupulous. And if they sell too much or if they overload their platform, they don't mind keeping the $70, killing your access and not having to serve your IP, right? And I just say you're right. There needs to be something. What is it? It's a maturing market, I think. Like as a consumer, I'm way more mature than I was, and I move millions of dollars now, and I can make dents in that. But as you see more and more educated consumers and people dumping off of Parler for this or jumping onto that, you're going to see a court of public appeals that is actually just sometimes an uneducated public that get manipulated by other vendors for their own purposes. And it's just a crap show right now.
So part of the idea of a court of honest internet is to not only give people the ability to fight for what would be their speech on the means of communication. But how many people actually have the time to go to court and fill out the mundane paperwork and file it and get a court date 6 months down the road to go up here in front of the judge when they can go in and postpone it 700 times? My vision
to do so,
right. My vision of the Court of Honest Internet is it's an instant court, meaning I get banned on Monday. Someone is hearing me by Monday night.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like
no defense time, right? Like just real dudes in a street talking about what just happened before they make a decision. Like,
right.
Yeah, I get it.
Because the thing about it is if you're deplatformed for any period of time, it hurts you.
Capability. Yeah.
Right. You lose capability, you lose business, you lose a lot.
I mean, unless it's Twitter, that's trash and you're fine anyway. But the other.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is I posted this earlier today, not on LinkedIn, obviously, but Twitter. I happened to scroll on Twitter today after our webinar panel, Matt.
Yeah.
And I was scrolling through Twitter because someone on the webinar, I forgot who it was, mentioned something on Twitter, and I was like, oh my God. When you go to a nightclub, like any nightclub ever, anywhere, and if you go to the toilet, and if you're one of the people that doesn't use the stand-up piss, or if you go into the actual toilet stall and you look at the walls, you lose all faith in humanity because of the stuff that people write there.
Sure.
That is Twitter.
Yeah.
The bathroom wall of the internet, exactly.
The bathroom wall of the internet. Now, I want to bring up something that you brought up earlier. So Facebook's annual revenue is $930 billion.
Yeah.
They have 2.8 billion users. Do the math of how much money they make per user.
Yeah, but you got to take out the fake accounts. So you're down to like double the money.
Right. That's true.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
No, but double that money. So they're making, that's why I put that survey today on my LinkedIn page of saying how much your data is worth after our panel, because I wanted to get that. Now, a lot of people say it's $500 and over, and they're absolutely on the mark. I'm going to do an entire episode on it, by the way. I'm picking 4 people who voted one way, and we're going to do we're going to mesh it up.
What number did they have? What did they come up with? 500?
So I put out a survey on LinkedIn, and I said, how much do you think your data is worth to a company? Your PII, your personal identifiable information, whatever that is. Is it $10 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, or 500 or more? And I think right now the result is 60 some odd percent think it's 500 or more.
Right.
And they're right. They're absolutely right, because Google isn't an $800 billion company without a product.
And that's an annualized revenue, right? That doesn't count ancillary capabilities they have as a result. I mean, just think of all the
Facebook. That's Facebook. That's not WhatsApp. That's not Instagram.
Right.
That's not any of that.
They're all enabled from that sync. And think of this. Let's say you get kicked off Facebook and you've federated Facebook to 12 different services, like your other services that depend upon that unique identifier that you've now just been kicked off of. Yeah. There's those other extensibilities too, right? So the impact should be
right. That's right.
It is. Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot though. Melvin here says, do you have a CISSP study material to email me? I want to get my CISP. Do you mentor? Will you take on Melvin, Matt?
Yeah, I will have a conversation with almost any human that has a passion for cybersecurity.
So Melvin, you reach out to Matt, and if he doesn't, you let me know, and I will put Matt on blast.
Yeah, no doubt. The other thing I would say is I liked the testing materials provided by Thor Peterson. Has some pretty good stuff for the CISSP on Udemy, and then also the I think it's Pocket Prep is a really cool instant feedback on the questions and understanding of things.
Yeah, or you just do what a lot of us who's done the CISP done is, if you know cyber and you're taking the CISP just to have the cert, go take the practice test until you pass it 3 times in a row, then go take the test.
Yeah, if you've done this 10 years, you're fine. It's not as hard as they say.
It's not as hard as they say. And one thing I've learned from a CISP instructor to everyone out there is, if you're going to go take the CISP, don't read the question first. Read all the answers, then read the question, and then you'll know what they want you to say.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
Hackers hacking the that's right.
Yeah, I mean, if ISC Squared heard me now, they'll probably revoke my cert and just be like, "You've cheated." But thanks for coming on stage, man. Stay in the green room. We'll bring you back up here. I want to bring up Andrew.
awesome.
next year. I want to get
Thanks,
to some
before we do that, let's rip through all these comments here, James.
Let's rip through some comments.
We've got to go way back here. I'm scrolling.
JJ says, Andrew, nice to meet you. Here we go. Take this one, buddy.
Okay, yeah, Eric, good to see you again, Eric. Agreement is agreed to via acceptable use agreement, right? Which no one reads, which is a problem. I'm actually trying to solve this right now. There is a white paper. I mean, look, this is big government stuff, though, so it's with the World Economic Forum, and they're coming up with an alternate to informed consent, or can we come up with an alternative to informed consent? Because you're right, that's a problem. People aren't reading them. Danielle, hello, good to see you. What about spammers gaining revenue? What about spammers gaining revenue?
Data brokers. She means data brokers. Data brokers, data brokers, data brokers. $150 billion a year industry minimum. That was 2 years ago. So I think they're probably at 200 and 300 billion at this point. Go check out my Goodbye Privacy podcast on YouTube and look up the data broker episode. It's one of my most watched episodes ever. And you'll see exactly how those guys make money. Eric's point here.
Right, to Matt's point, the commodity of persona is a tripping point on two levels. One, per user financing, and information sharing exposition to platforms. Good idea, but saddened with the pitfalls. That's right. This is what I'm saying. I think we're going to duke this out for quite a while and come back to the fact that the First Amendment's a pretty damn good amendment as it is. And hey, Patty. So I'm not sure what the OCC is, Patty. And the FDIC should go after them for money laundering. Oh, yeah, that was in reference to what were we saying there? Matt saying the game. Yeah, the game wasn't giving him his money back. Absolutely, 100% right. And Eric saying, what's the goal? Let's start with that elevator speech. All right.
And David says Twitter is trash. Eric says something here. James, you have to entitle your post, "You are the product. What are you worth?" I thought about that, and I figured then I was going to get a bunch of divas give me answers like, "I'm priceless," and there's a few of those comments on there, and so I've decided to kind of keep those comments off. That's why I wanted to say, "What's your how much do you think your data's worth?" Because it's not what you think you're worth, because that's a self-esteem issue. And we're educated technology folks, so we more or less know. But the general public is what I'm more kind of concerned about, because one of the things I think would change the way people view data is if they knew just how much money people were making off their data, right? Like if someone knew how much money you were making, let's say if someone gave you like a little piece of land, like leased you a little piece of land, and off that piece of land you were making millions and you were paying them pennies, and they find out, they're probably going to come back to you and be like, hey man, where's my cut? Where's my cut?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's bring up Andrew. All right, here we go. Andrew, what's happening, man? You're on mute, Andrew.
I hate that mute button, man. That mute button gets me every time.
It can also save you too.
Every Zoom, every meeting, it's great. So I hate to be the negative Nancy in the room, but I think you guys are way too optimistic. I would love to see the First Amendment stand true, but G.I. Joe said it best. Knowing is half the battle, right? So knowledge is power. I really just see, a Fahrenheit 451 situation come into play here, where government entities control the information that's put out there, even on our social feeds.
Just define Fahrenheit 451 for myself and the audience, please, Andrew.
Sure. Fahrenheit 451 is an American dystopia where the book version of it is that all books are banned except for the books that the government allows to be presented out there. The modern version of it is the internet's banned, and they come back out with an internet platform called the Nine, where the government controls all the news, all the information, all the historical references to be put out to the masses. So, man, I wish the First Amendment, if you can't tell from my room, I'm kind of a patriot, but, I just don't see it happening, because truth is, Eddie, you look at Yahoo and I look at Yahoo, and it's two completely different messages depending on what we've researched before.
Yeah, that's right. That is very scary, isn't it? You know, it's the first time in human history that we have a tool for dictators to really go for it. And so, you know, this is what we're seeing in China right now, for example, right? This is what we're seeing in Iran, that control of information. I think that it might be bloody. It might be a bloody battle, right? But I think that because America was birthed on these principles, that we're the ones that are going to have the shot to really fortify this. So I still have optimism. I don't think it's going to be easy. And I think we're going to come full circle and go, you know what we created here 200 years ago was a pretty good thing. Let's let it play out a little bit longer. That's ultimately what I think will happen. But that's interesting. I hadn't heard of the Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah. Paul has a comment here backstage. He says, we don't need to burn the books nowadays. Since they're digital, we can change them and erase them unless you have them online. That's true. That's why I went back to paperback books. It's because I bought a few books on Kindle and they disappeared from my library because Amazon decided that the books were not good enough for me to read, even though I'm fully entitled to read them. Right. But apparently that was not the case. So, yeah, I mean, you bring up a really interesting point, though, Andrew, and the idea of like, you know, does government, you know, kind of like the new version of dictatorship and freedom of speech. I'm a firm believer that, you know, everyone's seen Independence Day, right? Everyone. Right. Like no one's not seen Independence Day. Right. Like the first alien movie ever. That was, you know, mainstream, that wasn't geeky, was Independence Day. Because before that, it was all like Star Wars and Star Trek, right? You're either a Trekkie or a Star Wars guy, and that was your version of intergalactic. But I believe we're facing an Independence Day of sorts from tyranny online, from companies who are more powerful. Facebook has a higher GDP, I think, than like 80% of the countries in the world. Facebook could buy countries with the money they have. Apple could do the same. Google could do the same. YouTube could do the same. And so that to me is the biggest threat. And I think we're going to have to stand up and fight for it. It's not about optimism. I think we have to share these ideas like we're doing right here, right now, in order to get people to think differently. Because at the end of the day, if, you know, I said this earlier today, and I think Matt was referencing it, in our little webinar, I said, if people knew just how much their data is worth, they would no longer use those platforms.
Well, James,
until they were paid for it.
I mean, I get made fun of all the time. I go to the gym in the morning, right? I'm the only one guy in there that's got the old school journal, and I'm writing down my reps. I'm writing down my weight. Why? Because your data, it gets put into Apple's iFit cloud. And I mean, one day I foresee, you know, insurance agencies are just going to be able to buy your personal information to see how fit you are and then adjust your premium according to how you exercise. I think it's crazy the amount of, for convenience, we're just allowing these data companies to have access to our personal information.
Yeah, and that's isn't that interesting?
That's a great point.
What you were saying about convenience there, people will do these things for convenience sake. And there was an episode of one of the Star Wars movies, you know, I get this confused, but not the first three, the next three that was before the first three, right? Those three. So the Amidala lady, the Queen Amidala, she says, so this is how we lose our freedoms, through thunderous applause. It was a great line, because what George Lucas was trying to get to there was you had the emperor guy, the bad guy, Palpatine, and he's saying, we're going to introduce this new galactic space force and they're going to protect us all. And everybody's cheering it and going, yeah. But because it's prequel, we know what happens with those stormtroopers, right? We know that's a bad thing. So the Queen Amidala lady, when she says, this is how we lose our freedoms, through thunderous applause, it's like, exactly. This is how we lose our freedoms, Andrew, through convenience, through just saying, oh, yeah, I'll do that, right? It's just laziness is not quite the right word. Convenience is better. But, yeah, this is how we'll surrender that kind of information. So good for you for being a
So we're going to see a group of people who will either surrender or a group of people that will fight, right? And Andrew, you're one of the people who fight, brother.
I think you know what
side. Yeah, there's no surrendering on that man's arm.
I don't think. I think we know where I stand with all this. So.
I think we take this down the path of the reason I believe that a court of honest internet is a midway point, and this is my personal belief, is because I feel like if you're a liberal, not a leftist, and to make a clear distinction between the two. I think if you're a liberal who believes in liberal principles, meaning, you know, government shouldn't infringe on my rights, but government should fix every problem because, well, they're the government and they know how. And in case, you know, they're just not they don't study history that much, right? That's why they think that way. Because government's never fixed a damn thing ever. They've made problems worse over time. But if we look at it from that perspective, and we look at the concept of a court of honest internet, where you have your peers and the court has some level of power, we tend to give people a little bit more power back, but we also tend to educate people. And that's why I firmly believe that if I took a World Cup ad or a Super Bowl ad and I said, your data is worth to Facebook 20 grand a year, you using Facebook makes Facebook $20,000 a year. What's your cut? And if that was the only thing the ad said, how many people do you think that very moment would go on and be like 20K Facebook? That would be a trending hashtag on toilet wall Twitter. It would be a hashtag on Facebook, right? It'd be all over the place. And people would be like, we want a cut.
James,
because
I don't know.
I'll tell you one thing. Greed overcomes everything, brother. People see money and get blinded, man.
James, think about what retail establishments have done, right? They have turned us into baggers. We go in, we scan our own items, and we bag ourselves now. And think about how much money we save, you know, Mr. Walton, by doing that. So
I don't know, that you might be the only one that goes to the self-checkout lane. If I'm in a store and they've got cashiers, I'm walking over to that cashier. Please bag my groceries. Please and thank you.
Me too, but that's running out, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
I don't have a choice here.
You're not going to have a choice at some point. Yeah. And it's sometimes it's progress.
Good point. Again, Andrew, good point, man.
Yeah.
Good point. The bagging of groceries, that is such a wonderful, simple example of training us. But you know why? I mean, part of it is because we always complain about baggers. Number two is because when the economy does well, no one wants to be a bag boy in a store. Now, I guarantee you this, we're at inflation and there's a ton of jobs that aren't coming back. You watch bag boys make a comeback.
I hope.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much, brother. I'm going to
pull you
in here. I want to get to some comments.
Cool.
Nice seeing you, Andrew. Stick in the green room, man. I'm going to bring everyone back up here in just a few moments. We've got about 20 minutes left in the show. We're going to go full-on debate here in just a minute.
And for those in the green room, I see you're having a conversation. It's in private chat, though. So if you could, use your phone or use another mechanism to jump onto comment on LinkedIn, because the private chats are full. That's awesome. I love the conversation, but no one else in the audience can see it and it won't live in the archive. So try and use your phone to get back into the public comment section. All right, James, let's roll.
Let's get to this. Eric Williams says, understanding is the other half. That's the lesson. I love that by Eric. Matt, who got your memo before you gave the memo, said, I feel we tear ourselves apart because our adversaries direct us at opposite ends of the room and tell us to run. Yeah, that is also very true. Your buddy Patty here, that's all you, Eddie.
Hey, Patrick. So I had the same thing happen on my Google Playbooks, really. So Google's doing the same thing. I think, and I love the way James put that. They decided that I'm not allowed to read that, right? And after being paid for. So that's another crazy thing, right? Okay.
Right. That's like money laundering right there. Yeah. If the DOJ lets
Yeah. Nathan's saying it's like Leonardo da Vinci finding out the necessity of the social security card and the SAT score. Got a comedian in the room. I think we are seeing the two groups now. I can't remember what comment that was connected to there. Nathan, but you gain a better sex toy computer interaction module. And Nathan,
Eric here has a really good comment. In the early days on this conversation, I'm old, where Epic was a dream and commercialization was a fast-flung fantasy. It was envisioned that user control of information control would govern. Didn't happen. Now we have to regroup. Yeah, that's
it's really profound. Yeah.
That's very perfect. Eric, why aren't you on stage, man?
Yeah, get in the green room, buddy.
Get in the green room, bro. Come on now. Nathan says my CPU is a neural net processor. It's a learning computer. And that Neuralink monkey is my friend on Insta already.
I've seen that crazy monkey play Pong. Yeah.
And Nathan goes, we are losing to the creative gig professionals on OnlyFans. If you guys don't know what OnlyFans is, because I saw several people laugh and others go, wait, what's OnlyFans? OnlyFans is a way for you to support an adult movie star financially, legally.
Creative gig professional.
And by the way, Reddit is like the #1 lead generator for OnlyFans. So if you go to like any Reddit and you just do an NSFW search, not safe for work, and look up anything, all you see is OnlyFans links. Go to my OnlyFans. It is the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. By the way, human trafficking on Reddit is now higher than it is on Facebook.
No kidding, really?
Yep.
Okay, I've learned two things about. I've never done Reddit, but I didn't know what OnlyFans was, and the human trafficking thing. We'll have to come back to and maybe do a show on it. Greed has been an internet content motivator from the time that BBN took over the register space.
Mm-hmm. And our final comment here for this round from good old big man David Hurley. If you guys don't know David, David's the man. You guys should get to know David. So big companies like Walmart are pushing to raise the minimum wage so they can strangle small business and they can afford it. Then they find ways of making those jobs obsolete. For example, everyone should be paid $15 an hour regardless of where in the country they are, then proceed to get rid of the job with an iPad. Those self-checkout lanes are just another version to wipe out small business and transfer more wealth to the massive companies.
Interesting.
That is a very, very excellent point.
It's an Occam's razor point. It's the, it seems like the obvious answer.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to bring everyone back up. We've got about another 12 minutes before we need to kind of start our wrap up. And since I've got everyone still in the green room, I'm going to bring you guys up. Paul, Matt, Andrew, welcome. Here we go. The screen, everyone's on. All right. Here's where I want to take this. And I kind of want to take this into a group kind of very interesting discussion point, which is when we look at, let's say, David's last comment around, the idea of small business. Think of small businesses that have supported historically candidates that maybe don't fit the national narrative, having their ads not produce the same amount of turnover that, let's say, a big brand does. Just look at that power. Now, that to me is a scarier power because I'm going to take your money. I'm just not going to give you the return on investment that anyone else would make on it. See, Eddie, you're in Jersey. You get a 5-to-1 in return investment. But Andrew's in North Georgia. He's going to get 1.5-to-1, even though he's got a better marketplace than you do.
I think the challenge, and I'll point something out that potentially starts a ruckus. And I will say that I'm quite the centrist, but I also fall quite right in a lot of things. But I want to point this out because I feel even every person sitting on this call is subject to this. Our adversaries understand that we have a bipartisan system with expansion in the middle for no one, kind of back to your point on Facebook and the runtime and those things. But if they continue to drive the fact that I'm a patriot, that side isn't, we should kill them. We continue to lose. And I think the public court of opinion would be so subject to the manipulations of our dumb selves, self-included. I'm not away from this. But every one of you guys do wear on your sleeve somewhat of that rightism that's not centrism. It's not negative. I don't mean that negatively. Just meaning, I just mean someone would take it on the other side and go, those guys are bad guys. They hate me. And if they really looked at it, it's not about the political decisions. It's not about any of that shit. It is about the hype and the drive apart that our adversaries understand how fast they can manipulate our information. Just like you said, they can buy it, they can fake it, they can change it. Whoever said the books like Fahrenheit 451, I never thought about before. They get to rewrite it. It's not just burning them, they can change them and manipulate me.
Well, they're doing it now.
Every day.
Doing it now, right?
Yeah,
We're changing history, right? The retraction times 1619 project
Right.
was almost being taught in schools, right? I mean, they won a Pulitzer Prize for something that was factually and historically incorrect. So we see that, and that's a problem. It's a good thing that there are organizations out there like Project Veritas that are just taking them to school over this stuff.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So,
Sorry, I cut you off.
So I know, man, you're fine. I'm just, I'm sitting here and talking about our adversaries. Russia's making fun of our military. They're putting videos out there showing high-speed Russian soldiers jumping out of airplanes, changing machine guns, all this. And then the next very second, they're showing the woke United States Army commercial. And they're making fun of the division.
To further drive the division, right?
That's right.
I mean, really, though.
Well, so you guys were, I don't know if you guys were on when we had my good fat friend Jack Barsky on. And we talked a little bit about, the KGB and misinformation. And, the World War III is not going to be your traditional war. And a lot of people are kind of like waiting for civil war to break out in the streets, i.e. like watch a Hollywood movie of, people with shotguns and Will Smith all alone somewhere. That's not what's going to happen.
No.
We're in the midst of a world war. We don't even know it.
Degradation of our society as we know it. Degradation of the love and happiness that it is to be a United States American citizen and stand here in this country and defend it is turning into a joke, a laughing stock, a drive apart, a hatred, a woke, a erasure culture. All of these things are byproducts of very skilled adversaries that understand how to fight a 1,000-year war.
So, that's right.
I'd like to
amen to that.
Yeah.
So, 2 points. One is to clarify what you were saying earlier. Really simply, if you're different from me, you're dangerous. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, 100%.
But I was at an FCA conference yesterday. We did a live networking event, and somebody brought up a good point. He was talking about diversity at companies. And he said, traditionally you would think of diversity as being a woman, a guy, a white, a black, a straight, a bisexual. And he said, but nowadays, those people, actually, they might all come from the same family. They might all have the same background and experiences in the United States. So those guys are more likely to agree on some things than if you have 5 straight white guys. The diversity of experience in America is actually what's going to wind up making us stronger if we get through this, because everybody's coming at it. You see people from all walks of life, all shapes, colors, genders, whatever, that will agree on some things. And what we have to do is get past this point where if you're different from me, you're dangerous.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the disinformation and misinformation that we see in disinformation warfare, we see it everywhere globally on every democracy, right? And we see it being done on the behest of big tech companies. So there's been something going on LinkedIn for the last several weeks where there's been a lot of anti-Semitism, and I spoke about this a little bit, but I'll speak about it a little bit more. I will unequivocally, unapologetic for Israel defending its right to protect its citizens
With
from
you,
a
100%.
terrorist organization that the number one book in their charter is the destruction of the Jewish state.
Yep.
And the chant by people in the streets of New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, where they say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That means that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, all of that belongs to Palestine. They're not talking about the 67 borders or the 48 borders or the 47 partition. They're not talking about that. They're talking about the whole land as it is, meaning they want to cleanse it of Jews. And I'll be damned as a Jew if I'll ever let that happen again. Not when I still have my right for the Second Amendment, not when I have my first right for freedom of speech, and not when I live in the greatest country on planet Earth. I will unequivocally stand with it. And we saw stuff on LinkedIn where people were sending me anti-Semitic comments all day long, man. All day long. I was getting beat up. People were, and I'm not political on LinkedIn, and people know this. Like, I am very apolitical on LinkedIn. Right. But I was getting hit with anti-Semitic stuff. And I started reporting people who were posting blatant lies on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn did nothing about it. In fact, they wouldn't take anything down. So we started documenting this. and a good guy by the name of Yoel Israel on LinkedIn has been trying to reach out to LinkedIn, and he actually spoke to a human being this morning from LinkedIn who said, yeah, this goes, our content moderation is done overseas by different call centers. So understand this, they could have content moderation in India, and the person who's doing the content moderation believes in anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Right? And so now that person sees it and goes, well, that's right. Israel does murder innocent Palestinian children. And by the way, that's
well, perception
totally
is reality, right? Perception is reality has always been the case. That's the same reason I got dates in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
knowledge is power, man. G.I. Joe.
And but you see that stuff and you go to it, and that's why kind of, when I always go back to the idea of the court of honest internet, because if you had a group of people who were vetted and had a profile and said, hey, I want to be your arbiter, I want to be your jury for this specific scenario, right? And I take a claim against LinkedIn for unfair practices, because we're seriously considering of suing LinkedIn with a class action lawsuit. In fact, we're talking to several law firms about upholding of not having a clear standard in their terms and conditions of what constitute hate speech. So what does it take to constitute hate speech? What is that standard? Do you know what that standard is on any platform today?
No. It's
up to arbitrary.
It's the end user agreement that you signed. But
what is it?
It's the arbitration of that's missing, right? It's
so what gets you banned?
Idiot number 2 gets to pick,
Right. What gets you banned?
Well, I mean,
what gets you banned?
That's where you separate the police from the courts. You can't be both.
So I was a CPO,
but these platforms are both.
Right.
And I was posting pictures of beef jerky on Facebook. Good example of this, right? Beef jerky.
Okay.
And steaks. Normal stuff. One moderator would allow it. The next moderator will reject it because we're not allowed to sell animal parts on Facebook.
Oh, good Lord.
So, I mean, it's the same deal. It's all about the arbitration and the words. There's no clearly defined anything here.
It's like James was saying earlier, it's kind of like the mob rule. This is probably why it's not clear, right? And this mob.
It is. It's mob. We live in a mob rule. I hate cancel culture. I hate cancel culture on any side.
A manipulable mob rule is my point. That's why I say the court of honest internet has a lot of fallacy in the sense that you could manipulate the opinions enough to have certain influence, right?
But you can do that in court too, right? Because you can do that. If OJ got off on a jury because a glove
don't fit, right?
Right. You can't convict. If the glove don't fit, you can't convict.
Nice rhyme, nice cut statement. That's it. Yeah.
But that's
histrionics on the glove.
But that was brilliant by Johnny Cochran. That was probably one of the most brilliant legal defense moves ever done in U.S. history. It got OJ acquitted of the crime because it influenced the jury. There's no perfect system. The solution we need to look at is what's the most imperfect way to handle an imperfect situation.
Agreed. Yeah, that's that.
I agree 100%.
See, that's the best you can ever get. And what's interesting about that is the fight, I think, from the left is that they are not happy with the best that you can get. Right. And they sacrifice the best for an ideal of perfection. Right. The antidote to a bad idea is a better idea. And meritocracy, as dirty as it might be, is the best idea we've come up with. It's like, sorry, people, even I will suffer under meritocracy. Why? Because there are people who are so much smarter, stronger, than me. And yet there's no other antidote to it than just saying, look, we need to put together a system in which people are rewarded based on their merits. Too bad, so sad if you don't stand up to the mark, but let all of the other sort of socioeconomic hierarchies of that system just fall into play. And the trouble is that a meritocracy will always stack like a pyramid. So you'll have the majority at the bottom, and this is what we're fighting, right? Is a majority saying, hey, look, I want a fair shake in life. It's like, you got a fair shake. You won what they call the ovarian lottery. You're born in the West. You've won the ovarian lottery. So what more could you want? Just go for it. But that's the issue, right? We've got the majority down here, and the mob are the employees at Twitter and Facebook and all these other companies.
See, and I don't necessarily agree with that. Twitter and Facebook and a lot of them employ the mob. I think it's a small minority that's just very, very vocal that shuts everyone up. And it's no different than the banning of former President Trump from their platform. Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis, said this brilliantly the other day when he did the press conference signing the big tech law into effect in Florida, where he said that the new law in Florida essentially means that if big tech bans you, they can pay you up to $100,000 a day.
There you go.
Right. So that's kind of like what Ron DeSantis is essentially saying is if I'm an everyday Floridian today, like I want to move to Florida just for that law, because if they ban me or if they deplatform me for any reason,
then you're just going to start seeing shadow bans. I mean, Graham
correct,
Allen's seeing shadow bans now.
That's brilliant, Andrew. Yeah. No doubt.
But there's no perfection, Andrew, right? There's no perfection, but that's
You're right.
That's going to make him think about it more and more and more, right? So if I know that pre-ban, I know I'm getting shadow banned on Twitter.
Right.
You know how I know I'm getting shadow banned on Twitter? I post content every single day. I don't interact. It's all automated. I haven't lost or gained a follower. So either all 600 people who followed the CyberHub podcast Twitter page are like content with a Podbean link, right? Or no one is seeing my page, right? And no one is seeing my post. So no one's interacting with my content. So I know I'm getting shadow banned by Twitter. I know I am. Right.
Now we have a minute and a half, James. We've got a bunch of comments that I would love to hit up to end the show here. So
let's
any
do it.
final words from Paul, Matt, Andrew?
Well, one real quick thing is that there are facts, right? So there's a lot of judgment on the stuff, but there are facts. When you talk about the Jewish stuff, James, a lot of the people put out stuff that is just false information that can be easily attended to.
Yeah, I agree with that. But again, it's you're fighting a war where I saw people say, I stand with the people of Palestine, and I'm like, haven't heard of the place. I know of Israel. I don't know of a Palestine. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know of Palestinian territories, that we're giving to, that are all Jew-free, and yet there's still terror against Jews from those Jew-free zones. And if you're a Jew and you happen to go into that Jew-free zone, you might get lynched to death, but hey, what do I know? All right, guys, I'm going to pull you back into the green room. We're going to get to these comments, and we got to sign off here in just a minute. All right, thanks,
nice meeting you guys.
Andrew, Paul.
Nice meeting everybody.
Bye.
All right,
let's speed through this. So I'm going to go through Nathan. We might get to the point where we'll not have a choice in purchasing anymore. The way we are being funneled by the AI algorithms while we are fighting each other, we're arguing while Amazon swallowed the whole MGM.
Right. Yeah.
Patrick says the big corporations are doing this all under the guise of the ESG,
environmental sustainability and governance. Yeah.
Yep.
Growth.
Nate says they're using very sensitive movements like social justice and human rights movement to infiltrate our most vulnerable populations. That is also true. Nathan says American military has the most experienced force. Nobody can stand up to our real battle experience in the past.
Which is why they're hitting us on disinformation. Exactly.
Right. Other military may have the gears and numbers, but no experience. That's also true. Eric says, with 12 minutes to wrap, here's my wrap. Advertisement is not the goal. Influence is the goal. Influence is achieved via engagement, where realization only depends on direct interaction, not meta. What is that? Meta iberteraction answers.
Eric schools me in English too, by the way. I love that.
Yeah, I got to have it like a thesaurus when Eric's like commenting, man. I love it. Nathan says, amen. Paid for by Qatar and Iran, indeed, and U.S. taxpayer money this time. Hamas got $150 million 2 weeks before. The PLO got $150 million, $100 million went to Gaza. So a lot of the missiles that landed in Israel were courtesy of the red, white, and blue. They should come at me when I'm eating my sushi, not a lucky day for them. As a righteous Gentile, I support you 100%. Thank you, Pat. Love you, Paul. James, I feel your Angus. It is tangible and real. One love, bro. Thank you, Eric. I do appreciate that. I spoke my mind in an Israeli room in ClubHouse, and I got followed by some funny characters, and someone shouted F you after. Yeah, ClubHouse is you see that happening there. Clear as mud terms by Lou. Definitions are the baseline always, and take the next few. Here,
definitely, yeah. David, thank you. You get banned if you hold beliefs that are not in line with the current leftist orthodoxy, and that's the trouble with these organizations. They all lean in one direction. There are no standards, arbitration, and anything can be assigned being racist, right? As we pretty much not anyone, but people who are vocal about voting for Trump last year was called a racist. The perfect should never be the antithesis of the good. Exactly, that's right. Yeah, and then break down the big cause. It might be coming, and bring back local small businesses. Look what happened with Joe Rogan after he came on with Spotify. What did happen? But I follow Rogan a lot, right? Now the mainstream is all crying in unison about how crazy Joe is. Oh, really? Yeah, I don't pay attention to those buggers. I don't watch mainstream anymore. All right, haven't for years.
And this might be the best comment.
Okay, the DeSantis pronouncement is tantamount to saying you can't have pineapple on pizza at a restaurant, no. Eric's awesome with words. Yeah, that's great.
Brilliant. We've got a lot of other comments, but we are 2 minutes over, and we do have a hard stop. So I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. Next week, we're going to be talking about crypto.
Yeah,
so
crypto, the ledger, blockchain, not just cryptocurrency, but what that's going to do. I want to start an amazing conversation about, I've been really looking at this in the last few weeks, and the world's going to get turned around on crypto. So I would love to understand if you can go and bring me your thoughts for next week and do a little bit of reading. Would love to understand how might crypto impact what we are talking about today, right? And not crypto, I should mean the ledger, blockchain. So, if you've got a reputation as Eddie Doyle, then surely what was it, Matt, who was saying a little earlier? It was Matt, I think, saying in a court, you could have some kind of trace of, hey, this is my reputation. That could live in a blockchain. That's kind of interesting. But also smart contracts are going to turn this world inside out. Let's have a great conversation about that next week, ladies and gentlemen. And in the meantime, be safe, be amazing, be awesome people.
All right, guys. Cheers. Tune in to the other side of cyber, the practitioner brief tomorrow as we wrap up the week. And if you missed it, the CISO talk that I published today with 4 brilliant cybersecurity minds, Sam Phillips from Wells Fargo, Ken Foster from Fiserv, Gautam Vyas from FIS, and Paul Farley from NCR. Go check it out. All right, that's it, guys. Cheers.
Take care, everyone.